"It's just a plate, Dad." That's what my son said as he slammed my late wife's blue willow onto the table, chipping more than porcelain. In that hard, humiliating clack, I heard every quiet withdrawal, every excuse, every time my home was treated like a set and my trust like petty cash. That was the moment love stopped leaking. I stood up, froze the joint account, and started documenting everything. Because if family turns you into a prop, you either break or you draw a line and make it law. Before we dive into today's story, let us know where you're watching from. And as you watch, don't just sit back, be part of the experience. If a moment grabs your attention, whether it's powerful, unexpected, or deeply moving, drop a comment with the timestamp of that scene and share your thoughts. Your reactions bring the story to life, and we love seeing which moments resonate with you the most. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now grab a coffee or tea, settle in, and let's begin. Dawn opens like a careful hand over Bellingham Bay, laying a pale ribbon of light across the water and the cedar shakes of my little house. The chill off the straight tastes clean, a pinch of salt caught at the back of my throat. Gulls drift on the gray, sounding like squeaky hinges in an old hangar. Somewhere out past the marina, a ferry gives one low horn, then another, and the sound rolls up the hill to where I'm standing with my coffee, steam feathering the air. The porch boards flex under my slippers the way they always have since I redecked them after the windstorm 2 winters ago. I built most of this place back to soundness with these hands. Re-shingled roof, squared door frames, a kitchen rebuilt from naked studs and patience. Inside, the kitchen holds the kind of order that calms a man who used to keep a flight line turning. The pine shelves I planed by feel. The plate rail I cut with my best dovetail saw. At the center of that rail, catching the first shrug of sun, sits the blue and white plate my wife loved most, the one from the old blue willow set. The glaze shows faint crazing if you tilt it, hairline maps of time. Most mornings I brush a whisper of dust from its rim with the cuff of my sleeve, the way I might have brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. The plate doesn't just decorate the wall, it keeps the wall honest. It says, "Here is where our life happened, and here is where it still rests." Routine squares my days. Coffee black. 2 slices of toast. Stretch the back until the bark of pain loosens. Walk down to the marina, trade nods with other early risers, watching the tide scuff the pilings. At the little senior-friendly gym cafe on the corner, there's a round of quiet talk about weather fronts, boats that need paint, shoulders that won't quit aching, and which numbers on the heating bill can be trusted. I fix what I can for the folks who need it. Hinges, a bent latch, a blade that wants a new edge, and don't take money unless someone insists. Back home, I sit at the kitchen table and write expenses by hand in a narrow-ruled ledger with a ballpoint that leaves a slight ridge in the paper. Writing it down makes the money real. Numbers typed into a screen float. Ink holds. My name is Thomas Rourke. Tom to everyone but the DM5 and the undertaker who wrote the certificate 5 years ago. I spent 3 decades as an aircraft mechanic, later running a precision tool repair shop where the hum of a grinder was a kind of company. The back gave out before the mind did, so I retired early. Grief is a species of labor. The body learns to do it by repetition and small, orderly tasks. The house responded to that rhythm. Boards lay down straight when asked politely by a man who sands his sorrows into their edges. A year after my wife passed, the bank suggested I add a co-signer to my account for emergencies. The word felt practical, like a torque spec. Evan, our boy, had a new wife and a good job helping people find mortgages. He was what you'd call persuasive in a clean shirt and a tie the color of fresh spruce. It made sense at the time to put him on the account. Pension and Social Security would land there. Bills would go out on schedule, and should I take a bad turn, someone with my name would be able to sign. I told myself family is the safest vault. I still tell myself things like that, though lately my sentences take longer to finish. Evan and Kayla moved into the upstairs last fall, temporarily, to save for a down payment. Youthful footsteps returned to the staircase. A second toothbrush appeared in the bathroom drawer. The house, which had grown used to breathing slow, learned to lift its chest again. Evan's work keeps him light on his feet. Meetings, calls, clients who want an answer yesterday. He's in and out, smiling, apologizing, promising to sit down for dinner tomorrow. Kayla stays more, chasing light the way cats chase a sunbeam. She films. She edits. A matte black tripod became part of the furniture, then a ring light, then a set of pale curtains to open the room. I let the curtains happen, the frames too. The house needs to read on camera, she said once, stepping back to squint at a shot. I didn't mind the squinting. I minded the needs. Some evenings she praises the kitchen for its lines, the way the plate rail anchors the eye. Other evenings, I see her gaze hover on that blue plate like a stylist measuring a room with invisible tape. After she packs away her gear, I tend to reach up and center the plate again, more careful than I need to be, the way you check a latch even after you heard it click. The habit makes me feel silly and steady in equal parts. What we talk about around here depends on who's in the room. With Kayla, it's followers, engagement, brand fits, golden hour windows. With Evan, it's rates and points and nervous buyers. With my neighbors, it's whose shoulder feels like gravel, which electrician still shows up, whether the salmon are running strong. A day is measured by weather and tasks finished and what still works. There's a little cash withdrawal in my ledger this month, written in my smaller hand. Equipment, it says. I underlined it out of reflex and moved on. The bank's notifications land on my phone with the chirp of a small bird I haven't bothered to rename. Earlier this week, during one of Kayla's shoots, she looked toward the plate rail and said soft, almost to herself, "We could brighten this corner." It wasn't a request. It wasn't not a request. I took the plate down, dusted it, and set it back on center, listening to the gentle tap of porcelain on wood. At night, the ring light clicks off and leaves a coin of afterimage floating in the dark. Upstairs, footsteps cross back. I rinse my mug, wipe the counter, fold the dish towel along its seam. Before I turn out the kitchen light, I look at the plate again, still centered, still mine, and feel a peace that is almost earned. The house hums, the bay breathes, and the day seals itself with the tidy decisiveness of a well-cut joint. I sleep on that thought, not yet knowing it's just a lid pressed over a simmer. The numbers arrive as little chirps on my phone, a tame bird I train to sing whenever money moves. I keep the handset beside the paper ledger and copy each alert by hand, because ink steadies me in ways a glowing screen never has. This week, the bird sings twice more than usual. 2 cash withdrawals blink in the app with labels that feel like shrugging. Equipment. Promo. I print the letters into the ledger in small block caps and underline them once. The ballpoint bites the paper and leaves a faint groove, a ridge my finger can find later when memory plays coy. I don't call upstairs. Courtesy has its own momentum, and grief teaches a man to avoid little storms. Kayla descends near noon with a fresh ponytail and a lens cap twirling from her finger. She talks about frames per second, about a stabilizer that will let her float through the kitchen in one clean line. She asks to borrow the card just until the brand payment hits, and she smiles with a brightness that makes refusal feel like turning off a light in someone else's room. I hesitate, then slide the card from the bowl by the keys and note the time, the reason, the expected return, as if I'm laying breadcrumbs for a future me. Evan breezes through at 3, a weather system of loan folders and apologetic charm, tapping a line of figures into a calculator app before kissing the air near my cheek. He explains that his week is all locks and commitments, money he needs to float for a few hours so nervous buyers don't drift away before the ink dries. It's just quick-turn working cash, he says. Modern finance moves fast. I nod without assent. The word float makes me think of cold water and the way a body can look calm while a current drags at its ankles. In the late afternoon, a low amber enters the house and lays open every surface. I'm wiping the plate rail out of habit when I notice the glass of the curio cabinet wearing a fine new crack, thin as a hair and running 3 inches from the corner. I touch it with the pad of my finger and it's smooth like a healed scar. Storms have taught me that cracks announce themselves quietly, the way fatigue does. The blue willow set inside, stacked safe years longer than I expected my hands to be steady, looks suddenly like a family I've asked to stand still too long. The memory plate on the rail isn't where it belongs. Not wildly askew, just a finger width out of true enough to tilt my breath. I lift it, feel the cool dimples of the porcelain, and center it again. It clicks softly against the wood the way a tool slides home when the angle is right. The small relief is fleeting, but it's real, and I let it happen. Golden hour comes hungry. Kayla sets a tripod in the doorway and talks to a lens as if it's a friend who never interrupts. Her topic seems loose until it isn't. Older folks resisting change, clutter as a habit, making space for the future. She never uses my name, but the camera frames the kitchen, and the microphone hears the breath of the house. From the hallway, I watch a bubble of text float up the screen and pop. I watch her nod as if wisdom has agreed to rent a room in her chest. The words are general, the angle local. I return to the sink and clean a pan that doesn't need it. Being made into a symbol, even politely, scratches at a man. Loneliness will make you sand your edges for company, then wonder why you've become a smooth thing people set their cups on. I remind myself that kindness is not consent, that quiet can be a boundary instead of surrender, but the reminders feel theoretical, like safety lectures delivered after the wheels are up. I try a gentle ask with Evan down by the fridge water dispenser where talk doesn't echo. I mention the withdrawals, the card, the way receipts would make my ledger less of a guessing game. He gives me the smile he uses to steer anxious borrowers away from panic and says, "I'll handle it, Dad." The sentence is soft, practiced, and it lands like a door eased shut in my face. The next morning at the gym cafe, a neighbor in a Seahawks jacket mentions his daughter moving back home. He says he and his wife keep a joint account with limits. Limits keep love from leaking, he says, and the phrase sits in my pocket all afternoon, tapping like a loose washer each time I move. Back home, I decide on ritual, the kind that tells a house where its borders are. I clean the plate rail with the old horsehair brush, polish the rim of the blue willow until the glaze blinks. Sunday dinner it will be. Roast chicken, corn, and the cloth runner my wife sewed when her stitches were still small and even. The plate will sit centered as witness. A table can hold more than food. Night returns with its inventory. A dimmer hum from the fridge, a heat tick in the baseboard. Footsteps upstairs crossing and recrossing as the ring light blinks to a black coin. I put the day into the ledger in orderly lines and draw a circle around a new entry. Sunday talk. No thunder, no slam. I write my plan the way mechanics write torque specs. Calm voice, steady hand. Keep tone low. Ask for receipts. Propose a halt on cash withdrawals and online charges until we agree on a plan. I set the pen into its elastic loop, close the book, and sit a moment with the square weight of it against my palm. Before I cut the kitchen light, I check the plate once more. True and centered. My palm warms against the cool of the porcelain and leaves no mark. The house looks orderly. Order can be the shape that waiting takes when it doesn't know the name of what it's waiting for. I let the dark come like a lid settling over a simmer and tell myself the steam is just the house breathing. Tomorrow will bring its own chirps, I will write them down. And then, at a table set with a runner that remembers our younger hands, I will ask for what a man is allowed to ask for in his own home: clarity, respect, and a pause before any more of our money floats away. Late afternoon settles on the bay like warm glass. In my kitchen, the roast chicken rests under a loose tin of foil, corn steams in a Dutch oven, and the cloth runner my wife sewed lies straight and true down the table's center. I align the forks and knives until their reflections agree, then step back and sight the room as if truing a wing spar. On the rail, centered exactly between two nail holes, the blue willow plate watches with its calm little pagoda. I breathe once, twice, and pat the folded index card in my shirt pocket. The words I've written there are simple, almost shy. Receipts, pause on cash, no online charges without a plan. Tonight is for clarity, not combat. Evan comes down first, for once without the loan folders. He sets his phone face down like a promise and rubs his palms over his cheeks. Kayla drifts in afterward carrying a tripod out of habit, her smile landing in the general direction of my shoulder. I offer water. We make weather talk limp along the table's length, gusts, fairies, a rumor of sun next week, until the conversation thins and the room shows its bones. I lift the ledger from the counter and keep it on the chair beside me, the edge cool against my thigh. I want to check a couple things, I begin, slow and even, and ask about the 2 cash withdrawals and the stabilizer purchase. I add that I'd like receipts and for a while a halt on cash pulls and online charges until we sit with a plan that makes sense. The index card's crease is soft under my thumb, calm voice, steady hand. Kayla's reflex is pure muscle memory. She props her phone against a juice glass and tilts it toward the table so the lens can see our plates, our hands, the runner's pale stitching. "It's a good conversation for people," she says, half to herself, the word people stretching to cover an audience we haven't invited. I look at her and say, "Please turn it off at dinner." The sentence is one rung above a whisper. She hesitates, adjusts the angle, and leaves the red light barely glowing like an ember that refuses to go out. A boundary gets nicked. I feel it without bleeding. Evan steps in with the patter that pays his mortgage, hot market, anxious buyers, commitments that must be met with quick-turn working cash before the statement closes, and everything evens out. He talks clean and fast and careful, the way you talk a plane through crosswinds. I nod, not in assent, but to keep him from mistaking my silence for contempt. I restate what I'm asking. No cash withdrawals, no online charges, any borrow noted and signed, and a temporary household plan written down like a torque spec. His jaw tightens one click. A word like control flares and fades behind his eyes. Kayla laughs a small laugh and says something about clutter, in budgets as much as decor. Her gaze slides uninvited toward the rail as if she's lining up a shot for later. Brighter corner, cleaner lines, fewer old stories. Heat rises a degree inside the room. I rest my hand on the runner and feel the slight lift of each stitch my wife set with her steady little needle. There's history here, woven as tightly as bias tape. I stand to shift the plate deeper on the rail before sleeves and serving spoons start swinging. Light threads through the glaze and the pagoda glows for a heartbeat. For a moment I can see my wife's flour-dusted hands setting this same plate while the chicken cooled and Evan, 10 years old, practiced dribbling in socks. I turn with the plate in both hands and open my mouth to talk about respect for house rules, about the way objects hold the shape of a family's manners. Evan reaches without warning. He doesn't yank. He takes the plate with the speed of someone proving a point to himself. In the same breath, he brings it down, not to shatter, not cruel, but with a sharp, careless authority, a gesture meant to say, "This thing is only a thing." The porcelain hits the tabletop with a hard clack and bounces. Silverware rattles. Somewhere in the sound, a small bite snaps off the rim. A chip like a crescent of moon lands near the salt. Silence tightens the air. Kayla's eyes flare wide, then narrow into a camera-ready composure. The phone's red dot keeps its tiny vigil. My back locks from shoulder to hip as if a cable has seized. I lower myself into the chair and look at the missing sliver of glaze, the way a machinist inspects a scored bearing. Heat thins into something colder. Tenderness, the kind that bends for company, steps aside to let procedure through the door. This home requires respect and receipts, I say. The words are not loud. They weigh what they need to weigh. Evan opens his mouth, an apology already tangled with explanations about pressure and timing. Kayla murmurs something about growth. I don't argue. I pick up the pen from the windowsill and write 2 simple lines on the index card. Plate, chip, card, no more. The smell of corn and rosemary keeps trying to do its job to escort us back into the land of ordinary meals. It fails. We eat some, quietly. After the table clears, I take a quick workmanlike photo of the plate's rim, angling the shot to include the runner's stitching so size and place and context aren't guessed later. If there's a shard, I place it in a small dish and set it on the counter. The act feels less like fussing than filing. Kayla's phone likely caught part of what happened. The thought goes into a mental drawer labeled Save just in case. I can ask about auto uploads. I can ask nothing and still find what I need. Either way, the ledger has stopped being a private discipline and turned into a record. Tomorrow at opening, I'll be at the bank. I can hear the scripted conversation, suspicion of misuse, request to freeze the joint account until every line earns its right to exist. Tonight, I'll check the doorbell camera settings and make sure the cloud is catching what the house sees. Dishes wash and dry in motion, so practiced they feel like prayer. I wrap the chicken bones for stock, not only to stretch the meal, but to put something back together that was taken apart. When the kitchen is clean, I return the plate to the rail, turn so the chip faces me. The flaw becomes a compass. Point here, remember this. Upstairs, footsteps resume their ordinary circuit. Downstairs, I fold the runner along its seam, smooth the fibers once with the flat of my palm, and set the ledger on the table where my morning hand will find it. The bay darkens. The house steadies. A man learns which part of himself must harden so the better parts can stay soft. The bank doors slid open on a breath of refrigerated air and brewed coffee. I was there at opening, the carpet still showing vacuum tracks, the pins on chains lined like tethered minnows. I asked for a representative and sat on a vinyl chair that sighed under me. When my name was called, I explained what I needed in a voice that didn't tremble. A temporary hold on the joint account for suspected misuse, printed activity since the last statement, and alerts for any attempted withdrawals during the freeze. The banker listened the way good mechanics listen to a noise, not interrupting, hands folded, eyes steady. She clicked and typed and printed. A stamp thudded once on the page. "A hold is in place," she said. I nodded. Procedure has a sound that calms me. I opened a new personal account, routed pension and Social Security to it, set bill pay for the essentials, and asked for text alerts on everything. It felt like separating 2 streams that had braided too long. The banker suggested a pamphlet on elder financial safety. I didn't resist the word elder. Out on a bench in front of the hydrangeas, I clipped the documents together, wrote the date and freeze placed, reconcile nightly on the top sheet, then slid everything into a manila folder. The folder went into my canvas bag like a tool I'd reach for again. Back home, I installed the doorbell camera I'd been meaning to mount and tightened it until the gasket sat flush. The app walked me through motion zones and I drew rectangles that hugged the porch and kitchen entry. A test pinged my phone and the video showed my face too close to the lens. I backed up, waved, felt faintly foolish, and then felt something better than foolish, protected. I labeled the home network with a name only I would understand and changed the router's admin password to a string I wrote twice on paper and nowhere else. Honest tools doing honest work. Before lunch, I phoned the elder law clinic our retiree union keeps on speed dial. The attorney on duty sounded younger than my son but older where it counted. She told me to keep a log to save screenshots, to minimize verbal confrontations that leave no record, and not to change locks without proper notice if upstairs counted as a tenancy. Document, 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 she said. I started a spiral notebook and printed household record on the first page in letters I could read without glasses. I wrote the case notes like a line check: date, time, action, confirmation numbers. I wrote a one-page memo and taped it inside the pantry door at eye level. No borrowing the card, receipts for any household spend, no recording at family meals. I clipped a cheap pin beside it. The tone was unadorned. I didn't want to win an argument. I wanted rules where silence had been. When the pantry closed, the sheet lay there like a straight edge. In the late afternoon, Evan drifted into the kitchen without his phone in his hand. He looked at the runner, then at the plate, now turned so the chip faced me. I was hot, he said. I nodded. I restated boundaries and suggested we set a time later in the week to put a plan in writing. He agreed in that quiet way men do when they want to stop bleeding without discussing the wound. I noted the talk in the record but didn't bank the apology as interest. Kayla's counter came from the rectangle in my pocket. A story appeared about gaslighting the young, fear of change, and brave choices that sometimes offend. No names, no faces. The kitchen's backsplash looked suspiciously like mine. I took screenshots with timestamps and slid them into the evidence media folder on my desk. Disappointment is a colder flame than anger. It burns longer and leaves fewer visible marks. The camera had become a third party in our house. I settled the kitchen into a respectable order. The chicken bones from the night before simmered down into stock and I skimmed the fat with the back of a spoon. The counters cleared under a rag that smelled faintly of lemon oil. On the rail, the blue willow plate kept its station, the flaw turned toward me like a compass needle insisting on north. It wasn't self-pity, it was orientation. Financial hygiene became its own ritual. I turned on two-factor authentication for the bank and the insurance portals, changed passwords, set transaction alerts to all, and printed the last 3 months of statements. File folders marched into a tidy formation: bank, joint, bank, personal, insurance, internet/utilities, evidence, media. The labels were plain. The point was to make finding easier when hands would not be steady. The mail came late, as usual. Among the grocery flyers and catalogs was a white envelope from the insurance company with a window and my name printed too crisply. Inside, a letter: we have received a beneficiary change request and are processing. My name, my policy number, a date that sat on the page with all the polite confidence of a forged badge. I had not submitted any request. I called the insurer at once. After the prompts and the hold music, I asked them to place a hold on any change and to require in-branch, in-person verification with ID and video for anything touching beneficiaries. The representative added a case number, which I printed into the record in heavy ink. The date on the letter overlapped with a medical appointment from last week. I pulled up the doorbell footage and scrubbed the timeline. There it was. A familiar face, Kayla's editor friend, stepping onto the porch, glancing around, and disappearing inside with a folder the color of stormwater. The timestamps lined up like rivet holes. I captured stills and marked the time down to the minute. I didn't know the contents of the folder. I didn't need to know to act. Precaution isn't paranoia when you can name the screws. I placed fraud alerts with the credit bureaus, enabled credit monitoring, and froze my credit until further notice. A text from the bank arrived confirming the joint account hold had blocked an attempted online charge. I filed the message under proof the system works when asked to. I capped my pen and slid the record beside the ledger on the table. 2 books now lived there, one for life, one for evidence. I made space for both. Evening came without drama. Evan kept to his room. Kayla moved about upstairs in soft steps. The stock cooled, and I poured it into jars that would line the fridge like a row of small suns. The house hummed the way a well-serviced engine does at idle. The rail caught the last of the day, and the blue willow pagoda faded to a gentle outline. I wasn't angry. I was awake. Tomorrow would ask something harder of me, a kind of steadiness that includes saying no. For now, the front door camera watched the porch like a patient dog, and the folders were where I could reach them with my eyes closed. When I turned out the kitchen light, I felt the click of a switch, and under it, the click of a man finding his gear. A Pacific squall pressed its palm against the windows and smeared the view into gray streaks. Wind worried the eaves. Rain ticked at the panes like small nails. I was finishing the supper dishes, stock jars lined like amber beacons on the counter, when new voices climbed the stairwell in a practiced rhythm. Hello laughs, door thuds, a clatter of stands. By the time I wiped my hands, a portable on-air sign glowed red in my living room as if the house had acquired a neon heartbeat without asking the body first. The quiet pressure of the rooms changed. I felt it in my back the way you feel weather. Kayla swept past with a softbox under one arm and a spool of cable in the other, directing two friends into angles as if they already owned the diagonals between furniture. Tripods sprouted by the plate rail. A boom mic hovered near the threshold between dining room and living room. Evan texted from upstairs. We're using the space a bit. And then appeared, already performing ease, hands out, smile bright, eyes avoiding mine. Cables crossed chair legs like snakes warming themselves. A phone on a mini tripod had its camera pointed toward the kitchen, lens open, red tally light ready. I stepped to the doorway and asked them to keep gear clear of the plate rail and not to record in my kitchen. Please, no filming in here tonight, I said, one notch above the hum of the softbox. Kayla chirped a promise that they'd be quick and turned back to her checklist. The phone toward the kitchen stayed cocked. Just getting ambient, as someone said. The phrase light as lint. I named the rules memo quietly. No recording at family meals, now extended to no recording in the kitchen without permission. My heart stayed slow. I was measuring, not pleading. Crowds have their own physics. A guest backpedaled to frame a shot, talking with his hands, and his hip found the curio's edge with a dull, careless thump. The cabinet shivered. On the rail, the blue willow plate, already wearing its crescent wound from the week before, skidded like a coin on ice and tipped. For a heartbeat, it stood upright against nothing, then slipped, struck the hardwood, and broke clean in two. The sound was not theatrical. It was a low, guilty kook, the kind a shop makes when a good part just failed inspection. Even the softbox hum seemed to hold its breath. Everything stopped. I walked forward and knelt, feeling the floor through my knees, and lifted both halves as if they could still be persuaded into one. I laid them on the runner's center like a broken coin offered to a quiet judge. The pagoda split neatly down a painted tree. The crack looked like lightning captured in porcelain. Kayla began an apology pitched for a microphone. Round phrases, a drift toward accidents happen, but her voice aimed at no one in particular, as if the audience could acquit us all. Please stop recording, pack up, and clear the kitchen and living room for the night, I said. I added two facts without heat and without ceremony. The joint account was frozen, and the house rules stood until we had a written plan. Evan started a soft defense about pressure, schedules, opportunity slipping. I let the words pass like rain over a tarp. The point of a boundary is that it does not debate itself. I brought the file to the table the way a man brings parts to a bench. 1, 2, 3. Printed bank activity on top. Cash withdrawals and gear purchases marching in fast pairs. The insurance letter underneath, polite as a wedding invitation, noting a beneficiary change request I had not made, my notation of the case number in the margin. A tablet queued with doorbell footage. Kayla's editor friend stepping into my house with a gray folder while my appointment time glowed on my phone calendar. I spoke in short clauses, and the room absorbed each like weights, set down carefully next to the others. The red on-air sign looked suddenly embarrassed and went dark at someone's touch. Kayla called it misunderstanding and reached for her phone in the same movement. I told her, voice level, that broadcasting our disputes invited harm from people who owed none of us anything. Disappointment sat where anger might have, a colder flame. I photographed the plate halves on the runner with a small ruler for scale and slid both pieces into a dish, not because porcelain bleeds, but because evidence belongs somewhere specific. The phone aimed at the kitchen still showed its red tally dot blinking. I reached over and pressed the button until the light died. I said I did not consent to recording in my home. Then I set a large envelope on the table, the paper thick enough to signal its seriousness. 30-day notice to quit, prepared according to local law, I explained without hurry and without menace. If we could not sign a written household plan and respect the rules, they would need to vacate after 30 days. I told them I would not change locks or take any step the law did not allow. Everything would proceed by paper and date. Evan read the first page twice, jaw rigid, then looked up as if the words might rearrange themselves into a lesser thing. Kayla blinked at her crew and a hush went through them like a cue. The friends gathered gear. Cords wound into circles. Stands glided closed. Soft apologies drifted across the carpet with the rubber feet of tripods. The neon sign clicked, then folded into its own case. The house exhaled in pieces. Evan lingered long enough to say, almost to the floor, that we could fix this. He did not commit to the plan. Kayla brushed past with a clipped, "We'll discuss," a phrase that can mean anything or nothing depending on the wind. I rinsed the rain from the doorstep, washed my hands, and set the two plate halves upright against the backsplash like bookends flanking the ledger. The bay heaved under the squall, white seams ripping across the water and vanishing. Inside, the folders stacked square, bank, joint, insurance, evidence, media on top, a tidy gravity. I logged the time and the event in the household record, the pen leaving grooves I could find with my eyes closed. Then I turned off the lamps in sequence, each click landing in the rooms like a level set on a sill. A house can reclaim its rhythm if you give it back the metronome. Tomorrow, the decision point would come. Tonight, procedure held. Morning rinsed the bay to a pewter calm, the kind that makes gulls sound farther off than they are. The house smelled faintly of stock and wet cedar. I stacked last night's folders on the table, bank, joint, insurance, evidence, media, and slid a fresh sheet on top. 3 options, set in a large clear font, sat in tidy columns with signature lines beneath them like landing strips. Tenderness was off duty, procedure had the watch. Option A, a temporary lease for the upstairs at market rate, no filming in the kitchen, receipts required, periodic review. Option B, a debt schedule to repay, prior withdrawals with dates and amounts, no access to cards, the joint account remaining frozen until completion. Option C, vacate in 30 days, per the notice already served, locks unchanged until legal timing, walk through on day 30. I laid out 3 pens and a small desk calendar. Today wore a circle. Day 30 carried a starred corner. The effect was not theatrical, it was simply legible. I texted Evan and Kayla, sit down at 6 p.m. to choose a path. No emojis, no softeners, just a time and a purpose. I put water on for coffee, not because I needed the caffeine, but because mugs make hands look like they have harmless work to do. Out beyond the porch, the bay breathed in a long, slow rhythm. Inside, the house held its line. Pressure built off stage. The doorbell camera, when I checked it, showed delivery vans and passing dogs, not faces. My phone, though, flickered with a group chat banner I recognized from Kayla's earlier shoots, a thumbnail of a video exported, a progress bar marching. At 4:17 p.m., the clip dropped into the world with a cheerful caption and an edit that cropped me into an archetype, the scolding elder who resists growth. The plate throw was excluded. My steadiness was snipped into stiffness. The reach spread fast. Comments stacked. A stranger guessed our street from a blurred shot of the bay and the angle of a fence. I took screenshots with timestamps, copied the URL, and slid everything into the evidence. Media folder. Anger rose and then cooled into paperwork. I wrote an email to the community lawyer and attached the screenshots. Within minutes, she replied with a cease and desist template and the platform's takedown portal instructions. I filled the fields, attached proof, and submitted a defamation and unauthorized recording complaint. The confirmation number went into the household record with the neatness of torque specs. Portal case number, date, time, URL preserved. An anonymous account pinged my inbox while the kettle sighed. The message held screenshots of a chat I had not been meant to see. Kayla and her editor discussing a beneficiary switch and borrowing a signature. I saved the originals, exported PDFs, hashed file names with the date and minute, and logged a new evidence index number. Disappointment sank another quarter inch, the way a pile drives itself deeper when waves pound in sets. Resolve kept pace. Heat did not. By 5:30, the options page had been printed again, the pins aligned, the calendar squared to the table edge as if straightness could rub off on choices. I rehearsed one sentence aloud in the empty kitchen to make sure it contained no fraying. We proceed by what is signed. The phrase fit in my mouth like a tool with the right knurling. At 6, Evan arrived first, jaw tight, hands empty. He looked older than yesterday in the way men do when sleep has only skimmed them. Kayla followed with her phone in her palm, screen dark, resting face set for debate. I pointed to the page. No preamble, no speech. The pins waited like 3 small bridges. We will choose a path, I said. Evan's eyes moved down the columns. Kayla's thumb hovered over the phone and then came to rest in her lap. I restated the basics in a tone that would not need repeating. Lease terms fair and legal, debt schedule finite and specific, move out lawful and dignified. I added facts like dots on a map. The joint account remains frozen, the insurance beneficiary change is on hold. Recordings without consent are not permitted in my home. The room felt like a shop a moment before a torque test, quiet and keyed. Evan's shoulders tipped toward Kayla as if a magnet had touched steel. She murmured about control and narrative, the words sliding deep grooves from other days into this one. He cleared his throat and lifted his chin the smallest degree. "We'll think elsewhere," he said. I slid the notice envelope toward them and tapped the calendar, the circles and star. "Day 30 we walk through together," I said. The sentence landed without echo. He nodded once, not agreeing so much as acknowledging gravity. I requested the return of any spare keys for inventory. Evan handed over one ring. The law permitted them to keep one for access until move out. I confirmed by voice and in writing, no use of my card, no filming in the kitchen, no guests for production. Then I emailed the same bullet points to both and CC'd my attorney, attaching PDFs of the plan and the notice. The files left my outbox with a bland whoosh that felt sturdier than any raised voice I could summon. They stood. The house shifted around their leaving the way a dock lifts and falls as a boat moves off. Evan paused by the runner, eyes catching on the plate halves, set like bookends around the ledger, and then he walked on. Kayla opened the door to a square of evening and said nothing. The latch found its seat with a familiar click. I aligned the ledger and the household record until their spines matched and scheduled check-ins on the desk calendar. Day 7, day 14, day 21, with little pencil flags. The porch light clicked on at dusk. It is not a bright light. It is a steady one meant to be found by someone who already knows the way home. I washed the 2 mugs, dried them, and set them mouth down on the counter, an old habit that made a small roof of porcelain over a small, tidy hope. Out on the bay, a tug nosed past with its workman's patience, drawing a wake that took a long time to reach shore. Inside, I sat with the quiet weight of signed paper and unsaid things and let the room remember its original rhythm. Procedure had carried us to the fork. The rest would be calendars and clocks, and the discipline to keep every line straight until the 30 days ran out. Morning settled in an even light that made the bay look ironed flat. The porch was damp with salt. The cedar steps smelled clean the way wood does after rain remembers it. I drew a square around today on the desk calendar and wrote day 1/30 in a neat hand, then flagged day 7, day 14, day 21 with pencil ticks. The plate halves still stood like bookends around the ledger. The chip line caught a seam of brightness and turned it into a quiet reminder. Coffee rose in the room with lemon oil from yesterday's wiped counters. Order had a scent again. At 9:12, my phone chirped the bird note I had chosen for money in motion. An automated text from the bank followed. Attempted online charge on the joint account declined during hold. The wording was gentle as a rubber mallet, firm without bruise. I printed the alert and stapled it to a fresh page for evidence, media, then logged the hour, merchant code, and result in the household record. Procedure did its work without needing my voice to climb. I felt the small click of satisfaction that comes when a tool fits a fastener and no thread strips. Utilities belonged to me again. I confirmed auto pay for power, water, and internet, now routed from the new personal account. A simple chart on a yellow legal pad showed due dates marching in a row. I inventoried keys and cylinders, photographed each deadbolt and knob, dabbed graphite in the works, and left every lock unchanged. The law, like a good manual, tells you what not to touch. I checked the router and cameras. Cloud backups were healthy. Retention had been extended. Watching was not a threat. It was a record. Near noon, Evan texted a message that did not pretend to be more than it was. I'm sorry about the plate and the pressure. Will respect the 30 days I typed 2 sentences back that matched his shape. Acknowledged. Please remember, no filming in the kitchen, no card use, no production guests. Then I filed a screenshot and a note. Apologies are receipts that prove a transaction happened. They aren't collateral for future loans. Kayla tried a bargain in the afternoon, a direct message proposing to unfreeze the joint account for groceries if she removed the edited clip. I answered with one sentence that declined to trade money for reputation, attached the cease and desist ticket number, and added that all purchases should come from their own funds. I screenshotted the exchange and logged it. The language of trade belonged to budgets and lumber yards, not to names. At the gym cafe, I found the corner table with the worn varnish and the pencil marks from some grandkids' math. Neighbors asked if I had seen a bit of online noise, then let the question rest on the saucer between us. I kept details sparse and steered the talk to elder financial safety, joint accounts with limits, alerts set to all, the comfort of paper copies. An organizer from the community board listened hard and asked if I would speak next week on boundaries that protect love. I said yes. It wasn't to vent. It was to give other hands a handle that fit. Back home, an email from my lawyer waited with 2 notes. The platform had removed the edited clip pending review, and the state offered elder financial protection options if harassment or tampering continued. She recommended a precautionary petition for monitoring. I filed it, attached the evidence index, and received a case number that I printed into the record as carefully as a serial onto a nameplate. Copies went into the insurance and bank folders. The stack of paper made a low, satisfying weight. Repair work took its domestic form. I strained the stock and jarred it. Lids clicked in sequence and lined the fridge like small suns. The runner came clean in the wash and lay back down without complaint. I set the plate halves in a shadow box on the counter, flaw turned inward toward me. A man does not always need visitors to see what he needs to remember. Cable scuffs yielded to a damp rag. The booms and tripods of last night were gone. The room exhaled. Upstairs, packing began. The doorbell camera caught cardboard boxes going in, two at a time, tape pulled clean, a muted thunk of books settling. I watched and logged timestamps. There were no comments to chase, no speeches to intercept. Witness and record. Vigilance took less energy than argument. I reconciled the joint account to show $0 new activity beyond the blocked attempt. The personal account showed utilities settling where they should. I built a payment tracker on a clean sheet for the day Evan might sit with a debt schedule. Columns for date, amount, method, confirmation code, balance remaining. I printed weekly snapshots of balances and filed them by Friday tabs for continuity. If he returned, we would count forward, not backward. Around 5, Evan knocked to ask about borrowing tools for packing shelves. Driver bits, stud finder, A-level. I loaned the items, photographed their condition and serials before handoff, and wrote expected return dates. We stood by the stairwell where words don't echo and kept our voices the size of the space. I reminded him of the no production guests rule. He nodded. Understood. The exchange was clean and contained. After he left, I logged the tool list and set a reminder to check in 2 days before the end of the month. Evening leaned the bay toward pewter again. The porch light came on, not bright, but steady enough to mark a landing. I aligned the household record and ledger until their spines made a straight line and ticked a small box beside day 1 complete. Tomorrow's list already lay waiting: bank call, insurer check-in, a draft outline for the community talk. The house hummed at idle, the kind of idle that means the engine is ready if called, but content to rest if the road stays smooth. Consequence can look like thunder. It can also look like a quiet kitchen where rules hang on the inside of a pantry door and a shadow box turns a break into a lesson. I rinsed my cup, dried it, and set it mouth down next to the other. The plate halves caught the last note of light and returned it without glare. Out on the water, a tug dragged a wake that took a long time to reach shore. When the ripples finally touched the pilings, they lifted the dock just enough to remind it what floating felt like. I turned out the lights in sequence, heard each click land with the calm a calendar earns, and walked down the hall without looking back. Day 1 had the shape of a plan. The next days would too. The marine layer thinned to gauze above the bay, letting a slow silver through. I chose the cafe at the waterfront with iron chairs and the kind of quiet where you can hear a pencil crossing paper. I brought the household record, the payment tracker template I'd drafted last night, and a fresh print of the 3 options: lease, debt schedule, move out, laid side by side like tools on a bench. This wasn't a post-mortem. This was assembly work. Evan arrived alone, his shoulders sloped the way a man's do when sleep has skimmed rather than settled. He ordered a plain coffee and wrapped both hands around the cup as if heat could hold him steadier. We nodded our greetings. The options page sat between us like a placemat printed with choices. I flipped my phone face down and off to model what would govern the hour. No recording, no performance, just numbers that either add or don't. I set the purpose like a level on a sill. We were not relitigating, we were building a path with landmarks you could count. I slid the tracker across. Columns for date, amount, method, confirmation code, running balance. Paper now, PDF later. I said the lease would work if he wanted to stay, but that the cleanest repair was a debt schedule. Fixed dollars on fixed dates, no access to my card, the joint account staying frozen until the ledger read 0 owed. He studied the grid with a mechanic's brow, the crease that appears when a mind begins to accept friction as part of motion. Budget triage came next. On a napkin, we roughed in his rent for the new place, utilities, minimums on existing debts, food that wasn't aspirational, and bus fare when gas climbed. We found the leaks, subscriptions he forgot to cancel, meals out that were more habit than necessity, gear purchases that kept promises he didn't keep to himself. We chose cuts that preserved dignity, coffee at home on weekdays, one treat on Friday, gear moratorium for 3 months. I suggested the free community finance class at the library and a nonprofit counselor who helps set auto transfers and envelope systems, so willpower doesn't do all the lifting. He nodded with a relief I recognized. Structure shares the weight. From my folder, I pulled a one-page risk checklist and handed him a copy. No beneficiary changes without in-person bank or insurer visits and video verification. No new debt to pay old. No float borrowed from family funds. Written receipts for every transfer. No cash movements. Monthly statement review together for 12 months. He read it slowly, mouth moving without sound like he was checking each tooth of a gear. He signed the bottom and dated it. I countersigned and wrote the evidence index number in the household record. I told him I was signing up for a senior program that flags large changes to my accounts, so an independent verifier checks in before anything moves. Not a guardianship, just a guardian light. It protects me from scams and protects him from suspicion later. He exhaled in a way I hadn't heard since he was 10, a sound like the body admitting help doesn't insult it. We spoke of hope but tied it to hinges. I offered a conditional trust seed after 12 months of on-time payments and clean behavior. A modest sum toward a future down payment, released by a third-party trustee, earmarked for housing only. No social media conflict, no borrowing my name or credit, no beneficiary edits without my face and a banker's camera in the room. Any violation voided the seed. He asked if the door was truly open. It's open to the work, I said. Repair beyond money needed its own shelf. I invited him to the community talk next week on elder financial safety. 20 minutes, slides, a Q&A. He didn't need to speak. Listening would count. Maybe, if he wanted, 2 sentences at the end to acknowledge the lesson without rewriting it. I showed him the photo of the broken plate halves in the shadow box, the crack like lightning held still. Not a weapon, I said. A reminder. He looked longer than I expected and folded the napkin tighter. He reported that Kayla was angry and busy with the narrative. I did not do opinion work. I restated the house rules until move out. No filming in the kitchen, no production guests, no card attempts. Reconciliation lives in actions, not posts. The sentences sat on the table without echo. Then we put dates into ink. First 3 payment days, the first of the next 3 months, fixed amounts, ACH only, routed to my personal account. We set monthly check-ins on day 7 of each month and a quarterly review at months 3, 6, 9 with documentation. I emailed the schedule from the cafe's Wi-Fi. He replied, received, giving us a time-stamped acceptance beyond either memory. The tracker went into his wallet, folded once. A copy went into my folder. While the foam on our coffees thinned, I called the insurer to confirm the 180-day beneficiary change hold with in-person video verification. I wrote the representative's name and the confirmation code into the record. An email chimed. The platform had removed the edited clip for a policy violation. The case would stay open for review. I filed the notice into evidence media. Another email. A retired client from my shop invited me to consult as a senior financial safety advisor at their church. I penciled next month with a small square, felt something in me tilt toward usefulness again. We stood, hands met, brief, firm, neither absolution nor estrangement, but agreement. He pocketed the tracker and the checklist, and for the first time in weeks I watched him leave without the posture of a man pretending he might turn back. Gulls wheeled over a calmer bay. Their cries sounded less like hinges and more like ordinary birds. I walked the short way home, wrote every agreement in the household record, attached the cafe PDF and the calendar screenshot, and slid the folder closed. Inside the house, the air had a level feel, as if a bubble had found center. The shadow box kept its quiet lightning. The day had given us a plan you could point to. Tomorrow would test it. Tonight, the bay lay flat enough to carry a small boat a little farther without drama. Day 30 arrived bright and cold, the kind of morning that puts edges on everything. The bay lay sharp as cut metal. I swept the porch and set a clipboard by the door. Move out checklist printed in bold, lines for walls, shelves, fixtures, and a box for keys complete. The house smelled like coffee and new air. At 9 on the dot, Evan pulled up with a coworker to help carry. No Kayla. Boxes waited in a neat rank just inside the threshold, taped square, labels in a steady hand. We shook hands without speeches and began. I walked each room with the quiet a checklist teaches. Photos first, time-stamped shots of walls, baseboards, windows. The upstairs looked emptied rather than abandoned. Nail holes dabbed with patch, counters wiped, a box labeled Tom Meisk Hardware left deliberately on the landing, anchors and screws they didn't end up using. Studio scuffs ghosted the floor near the corner we'd all pretended was never a studio. I photographed and logged them, then marked them as normal wear, no deductions. On a sill, a single lens cap weighted like a coin someone meant to return. I bagged and labeled it for later pickup if requested. Back downstairs, Evan slid a second ring of keys across the counter. We compared each to the door it matched, ticking boxes as tumblers turned. Front, kitchen, basement, mailbox. Keys complete earned its check. Router settings showed no unfamiliar devices. Camera audit read healthy. We signed 2 copies of the vacancy acknowledgement, exchanged them like pilots exchanging a clipboard at shift change. Businesslike, respectful. The house exhaled without trying to make it mean more than it did. That afternoon, I sat across from a banker in a quiet cubicle and closed the joint account. The hold had done its job. Reconciliations balanced to the penny. She printed final statements in duplicate and slid a small tray forward. I placed the joint debit card on the ridged plastic and watched the shears bite. The snap of cut plastic felt cleaner than I expected. A closure letter joined the statements in a new file labeled Bank, Joint, Closed. Direct deposits were already landing in my personal account, calm as rain into a bucket. Online, 2 notes appeared. Evan posted a short, plain statement. He acknowledged boundary violations, apologized, asked strangers to give our family room, and disabled comments. Kayla pushed a brief retraction per the platform's notice. The edited clip remained removed. I took screenshots and filed them into evidence media. Relief had more square footage than vindication in me. It felt like a shoulder finally lowered from around my ears. That evening, the community center smelled of coffee and thermoses and paper still warm from a copy machine. Folding chairs faced a pull-down screen. My handout read, "Boundaries that protect love," in letters big enough for the back row. I spoke for 20 minutes, what joint accounts do and don't do, how alerts keep love from leaking, why beneficiary changes belong to in-person visits and video verification, and how a house memo can be a kind of kindness if it tells everyone the same truth. Afterward, the director asked if I'd run a monthly clinic on elder financial safety. I said yes and penciled the date. Giving other people a handle is a way to hold yourself up. By week's end, Evan and I met at a credit union with a trustee present and signed the conditional trust seed documents. The seed would be funded after 12 months of on-time payments and clean conduct. The trustee would release it strictly for housing. Terms were plain: no social media conflict, no unauthorized beneficiary actions, ACH-only payments, quarterly reviews. Evan initialed compliance pages while the trustee notarized and filed copies. I wrote the index numbers into the household record and felt a mechanism click toward future rather than past. Home, I sanded and oiled the studio scuffs until the floor's grain took light again. A bookcase found level under a felt pad, a banister screw kissed tight. Small repairs have a way of teaching breath back into a room. I mounted the shadow box on the kitchen wall, the blue willow halves aligned like a river traced onto a map, crack running true between them. On the rail, I set a simple white plate. No pattern, just a clean field. Not a replacement, a continuation. A week later, Evan returned the borrowed tools on time. Each piece matched its photo and serial. He stayed on the porch where voices don't echo. "First ACH cleared," he said. "I saw it," I answered. We didn't try to make the moment do more work than it could. The porch light, even in daylight, made a gentle circle around the door. In the office, I wrote a household record summary. Move out completed, keys returned, joint account closed, platform case resolved and archived, community clinic scheduled, trust seed papers executed. The calendar received its cadence, monthly payment check-ins on day 7, quarterly reviews at 3, 6, 9 months, the insurer's 180-day hold-in circled with a reminder to renew in person. Steady purpose likes a calendar to live on. The neighborhood answered in kind. A couple from 2 streets over dropped off a pie and a card thanking me for the talk. An older man carried in a letter from his bank and asked if I could help him read which number mattered. We sat at the table and found the confirmation codes together. I printed him a copy of the 1-page risk checklist and watched him fold it into the spot in his wallet where men keep things they will actually use. Blue hour gathered. The bay turned indigo. The windows held warm squares of light like steady lanterns. I took my seat at the kitchen table, lined the ledger's spine up with the now thinner household record, and clicked my pen closed. The shadow box caught a stripe of lamplight. The crack glowed as if someone had drawn a small, true shoreline between 2 pieces that still belonged to each other. This wasn't victory. It was integrity held. The house breathed at its own pace again, and I matched it without rushing. Tomorrow, the first of the month, the payment tracker would ask only what it asked. Tonight, the quiet said yes to the way we'd chosen to live. Sunday opens with a hush that feels earned. The bay looks like brushed steel, a long breath held without strain, and the kitchen lamp throws a warm cone across the table. I align the ledger with the slimmer household record until their spines agree. On the wall, the shadow box catches a soft silhouette. The blue willow halves hold their patient lightning. Beside them, the new white plate sits on the rail, unpatterned, making room for whatever meals and manners come next. This is not triumph. It is equilibrium after weather, a keel trimmed back to center. What held us together in the end were not speeches, but procedures. I learned to freeze first, talk second, to write it down so the paper could steady what the throat might tremble to say. Beneficiary changes belong in a room with a banker and a camera and a face you love on the other side of the desk. Anything less is a rumor. Recording belongs to consent. House rules taped inside a pantry door belong to everyone who opens it. When I leaned on process, tenderness didn't have to calcify to survive. The night the plate chipped opened a door I did not want to walk through. Documentation closed it gently behind me once I had stepped across. Joint accounts turned out to be less about love and more about clarity. A joint account is not a general fund for goodwill. It is a defined channel with banks on both sides. Caps and alerts kept love from leaking. We named emergency before we pretended to have one. I kept a personal account because dignity requires a pocket of your own, and I left the joint account for truly joint expenses. Exit ramps were designed before traffic, so when the light changed, I didn't have to invent a detour with cars already honking. The loudest lesson came from the quietest act. I did not litigate my family online. The edited clip tried to turn a table into a stage. I answered with timestamps, not takes. Paper beat posts, a cease and desist beat the urge to argue with strangers. Reputation proved itself a long game best played with short, accurate moves. Screenshots and case numbers earned more than any perfect paragraph I could have drafted in anger. When the platform removed the clip and archived the case, relief felt like a light going off in a room I hadn't meant to enter. The household record became a mercy I did not expect. It gave us the same truth every time we opened it. Index numbers slowed the pulse, photos with rulers turned feeling into fact, receipts kept from waving when memory blew through the room. I began to understand documentation as a form of care, a way to protect tenderness from the heat of the moment and the fog of later. Purpose showed up where community meets habit. In the church hall with its folding chairs and thermoses, I told what we had learned, that alerts are a cheap kind of grace, that in-person verification costs less than a broken month, that a memo on the pantry can carry a home across an argument without anyone raising a voice. An older man brought me a bank letter and asked which number mattered. We found the confirmation code together, and his shoulders climbed down a step. The director penciled me in for a monthly clinic, and usefulness pulled a chair out for me the way a good host does. Teaching safety returned a man to himself. A shared tool is a kind of home. The father-son road is not ribboned off with a bow. It is a path of small stones you step without tripping. 2 on-time ACH payments arrived, each with its code and its quiet pride. Porch exchanges stayed short and clean. The trust seed sits in the future like a buoy, visible and conditional, bobbing at the edge of a chart we both can read. Repair, I've learned, is not spectacle. It is calendars and clocks and showing up even when no one is watching. About Kayla, I keep my boundary without spite. The retraction lives in a folder, the clip is gone, the door is not barred. Expectation is simple and public, change shows in behavior, not captions. Family is a room whose walls you repaint together or not at all. I choose not to narrate someone else's brushstrokes. If I had to distill it for the elders who come to our clinic, I would say it plain and let it run like a voiceover beneath their own pictures. Set alerts and keep a private account. Freeze fast when you're unsure and thaw only when the math agrees. Insist on in-person ID and video before anyone touches beneficiaries. Write your house rules where the light reaches and enforce them by page, not by pitch. Avoid cash you can't log. Keep receipts until the month ends. Use cameras where the law and courtesy meet. Schedule reviews the way you schedule tune-ups, and teach what you learn so the next person doesn't pay tuition you already covered. Symbols matter because the hand needs a place to rest. The shadow box stays on the wall not to wound but to witness. The new white plate holds its quiet without pretending to be the old one. The runner lies aligned. The tools hang where the stud will always catch them. The porch light remembers dusk on its own. Small systems are daily mercy. They tell a house what time it is when the heart forgets. Evening drifts in and deepens the bay one shade at a time. The windows hold their warm squares as if they are keeping a promise. I close the ledger, touch the glass of the shadow box once, and feel the seam where fracture turned into form. Dignity is a boundary held in patient hands, and love, when it lasts, learns to live inside it. In the end, what holds isn't noise or spectacle, but the quiet discipline of boundaries kept. Love survives not because it ignores harm, but because it learns the shape of a sturdy container, clear rules, written plans, receipts instead of rumors, and a light left on for accountability. When the story turns rough, paper steadies the heart. Freeze first, talk second, verify in person. Keep a private pocket of dignity. Review, record, repeat. That is not coldness. It is care with edges. Repair rarely arrives as a trumpet blast. It comes as small, faithful steps, a payment made on time, a key returned, an apology that chooses deeds over captions. Integrity is less a moment than a maintenance schedule. And forgiveness, when it's ready, prefers the slow path. Watchful, honest, willing to build a future on facts instead of wishful edits. There is wisdom in letting symbols stand where words once flared. A plate kept in a shadow box, a new one set beside it. Not replacement, but continuation. Community, too, matters. Sharing what was learned turns private pain into public safety. A handhold offered so others won't slip where we did. In that way, a house becomes a lighthouse. Not louder, just steady. Thank you for spending this time here. If a line resonated or challenged you, tell us why in the comments and mark the moment that caught you. Your reflections help more people find their footing. And if you'd like more stories about resilience, boundaries, and the quiet work of repair, please follow, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Stay well, keep your documents close and your kindness closer, and we'll meet again in the next story.